Manala. It's been a while since I put something up here, so I felt that it was time that I shared something with everybody. And as you may know, I really enjoy spending time down at the coast. And recently, I was very lucky to spend some time between Oyster Bay and Cape St. Francis on a very isolated piece of the coastline there. And walking along this very rocky shore, the one morning we came across some bales of raw rubber. Now these are about 500 by 500 cubes of raw rubber that frequently wash up on the shore there. And I'd heard stories about where this came from, but then I started scratching around, and I found out that they actually come from a ship that was torpedoed off Cape St. Francis in February 1943 during the Second World War. And I then started having a look and was interested in the fact that these U-boats were operating around our coast. And it turns out that between the end of 1942 and 1943, 3 U-boat wolf packs were sent down to the southern tip of Africa here to disrupt shipping and to try and sink as much Allied shipping as possible. And this was because at that stage they were having difficulty in penetrating the convoys that were going across the Atlantic, and anti-submarine warfare there had improved to such a point that it was unprofitable for these U-boats to operate against these Atlantic convoys. So they sent these wolf packs down here, knowing that our coastal defenses and particularly anti-submarine defenses along the coast weren't that great at that stage. And so these 3 separate wolf packs came down here at various times over the next year or so, and really did wreak havoc amongst the shipping around the southern coast of Africa. In total, they sank they sank 114 Allied ships in South African coastal waters, representing about 600,000 tons of shipping. Now that's a fairly significant number. It's nothing compared to what was lost in the Atlantic, but you must remember a lot of the trade and the goods coming from the east had to come around Africa, as it's been for centuries. And they would lie in wait for these ships off our coastline and attack whenever they could. My late uncle said he remembers staying at Kasuka during the war, and just on the coast there, and he said he can remember hearing at night these submarines on the surface with their engines running, recharging their batteries. They'd surface at night so that they could run their diesel engines to recharge their batteries, and then during the day they would operate underwater. There is evidence of this all along our coastline, but in particular these bales that keep washing up, and that's as the ship deteriorates, so these bales wash ashore. So it indeed was a global conflict that affected every corner of the world practically, and we were no different down here in southern Africa. That the Second World War had a direct effect on us down here, and of course, you know, there's always evidence of something washing up on the shores that come off ships. And one of the fascinating things we also found there was literally hundreds of tins of tea. Now this is, if you can see that clearly, I'm not sure, it's a bit of a, but this tea comes from a container that was washed off a ship a couple of months before we were down at the coast there. And it's a high-end quality tea brand that is sold in the UK, and it comes from India. And I sat there and I just thought, wow, you know, this represents 500 years of trade. The same goods that were being traded 500 years ago, the same reason why Europeans began looking for a route around Africa that eventually led to the settlement of southern Africa, is still evident today. In the modern world, exactly the same types of things are being transported around a coastline on ships. And it really got me thinking about how significant Southern Africa is in terms of this global trade, and the effect that that global trade has had on the world. Not, not only just the settlement of European settlement at the southern tip of Africa, but this vast network that's spread out right across the world, that is still evident today. If you sit there, you can watch those ships going past all day, from oil tankers to container ships. There's a massive amount of shipping that goes past, and that's been happening for the last 500 years. I find that fascinating. Anyway, till next time. Cheers.